It should be live. I'll just open up the group so I'll see us. There you go. There's the feedback. It should be live. I'll just open up the... There we go. I edit that out for later.
Okay, right, no problem.
Excellent. Welcome everyone. We're live. Good stuff. Right. Welcome everyone. This is session 2 of our Wellbeing Month, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Anna. Anna runs Wellbeing and Change, and we're going to be talking about stress and anxiety and some self-help tools. So, how you doing, Anna? You all right?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Bill. Yeah, not so bad. A bit warm, but good.
Yeah, you're not too far. We're doing this by Zoom, but you're not actually too far from me, are you? So you're in sunny Kent.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, feeling the heat. Yeah, not too far away. I'm in Westmoreland, so.
And it is sunny as well at the moment, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Anna. How did you get into the wellness and counselling industry, and how you got your own business?
Well, a few moons ago, so about 10 to 12 years ago, I was working in London in public relations, which was very much like absolutely fabulous and, really exciting. But I just felt like I needed something with a bit more meaning. So at that time, lots of people were leaving London. So I was a commuter from Kent. And they were leaving London to become goat farmers, which I thought was really interesting. How could you just possibly check out and do something completely randomly different? Yeah. So it got me thinking about what I was going to do. And I met this elderly psychotherapist on the train. She was in her 80s, very wise. And we got chatting, and she told me about her career as a counsellor, psychotherapist. And she really inspired me. And I thought, I don't want to touch people, that's for sure. Wasn't really a body person. And I thought, why don't I retrain? So I started studying, and there's a lot of study involved, of course, but retrained as a counsellor, and then did lots of placements. You have to do lots of practice, get experience. Eventually, I joined Kent Police. I was there for just over 5 years. And now I work for myself in my own business. And I see mainly 999 employees, and also do my own wellbeing programs. So I work for myself now. So yeah.
Awesome. And you've actually helped me out with my business program, and you did some webinars around anxiety, which has been really helpful, and some tools. So I thought it'd be nice to bring you into the larger community, the community of pet groomers who are extremely busy people, extremely busy business owners, and we get a lot of questions coming in where there's a lot of overwhelm, there's a lot of anxiety. There's the country, the UK and other countries at the moment is going through a real sort of period of rubbishness, I suppose is a good word, isn't it? It's all a bit miserable out there. So part of our theme this month is just to give ourselves some help, so that if we're nice and positive and healthy, and hopefully our business will be nice and healthy and positive too. So what's like the first thing that we start talking about is recognizing anxiety. And can you just talk to us a little bit about what that might feel like for someone, and then we can perhaps look at how we can deal with it?
Yeah, I think for me, I often say to people, actually think about what's your normal. So all of us have our own individual normal, and it's really important just to keep checking in. And if you think your normal is changing a little bit, and for example, feelings of anxiety might be worries, lots of what if questions, you're kind of predicting the future, but it's mainly negative, then that's a sign that your normal might just be a little bit challenged. And if you think about mental health being on a line, so we put that on a spectrum, it's normal to have worries, that's valid. But what we don't want to happen is that worry to become really excessive and really dominant and kind of overtake things. So I think a good starting point is, look at your normal. If you think your normal, and it is unique to all of us, is changing a little bit, and you find yourself getting a bit more stressed and a little bit more anxious, worried about things, then maybe that's a sign that you need to be curious about. Some people get really scared by that, and I think it's very normal for us to have reactions to what's going on around us. There's so many factors, and particularly if you're running your own business. And I know pet groomers are really flat out most of the time, aren't they? It's quite a physically demanding role, and you're also dealing with the public, which can sometimes be a bit tricky, I guess. So, and you have huge responsibility. So I can understand why pet groomers who are running their own businesses would worry about certain things, put it that way.
Yeah, and just being a business owner on its own, as you and I know, can cause its own worries as well, and anxiety. And I suppose for me, I start to realise that those scales, those balances are being tipped when my inner voice starts to become a lot louder, and
Yes.
start communicating with my inner voice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you find yourself talking more inside, or do you actually say it out loud as well? Which way does it go?
Talking more inside, right. And then having that feeling of like your jaw being really tight. So it's very hard to talk outside. It's very hard to explain to other people around you what's going around in your head.
Yeah, sure.
I've been listening to a podcast, The Diary of a CEO, and he said it's very lonely. It's very insular. He's very it's all in his head. So I think for me, that's one of the warning signs.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about, for me, I just noticed that I start to get really irritable. So even the smallest things start to annoy me, or I get really impatient. And unfortunately, it's always the family that gets that, because I am working for myself as well. So I leave my office, and then it's somebody's not done something, and the stress comes out in a different way. So
what I found interesting from when you did our webinar with the private group was you were saying how people in the east of the world don't recognize the word anxiety.
No.
And that's just left me a little bit like, wow. And we were talking about other things like zebras don't have ulcers, don't they? Because they're always living in the presence and the now.
Yeah.
So could you just explain to people what the physical changes happen to your brain when you start feeling anxious, and how it's actually something that you can overcome because it's a physical sort of reaction?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, we have an automatic nervous system. So that's something that you may have heard of, which is the fight, flight, freeze, flop. And those are responses that we usually see in response to stress, but also trauma. And, we've got this beautiful part of our brain called the amygdala, and it's responsible for constantly kind of surveying and just checking that we're safe, because obviously we want to survive as humans. But the problem is the amygdala response has not really evolved. So if we go back to when we were cave dwellers, we needed that to kind of run away from really scary creatures to feed our families, etc. So what happens is the amygdala kind of fires off a complete physiological change in the body, which is that adrenaline response. You might find your heart beats faster, you get sweaty. I always find my throat goes tight, I can't speak very well. Some people feel sick because the digestive system will shut down, and the body's basically trying to fuel itself ready to respond to a threat. Now, when that amygdala is nice and big and activated and it's doing its thing, it does mean that our online kind of rational, controlled thinking has to be switched off temporarily, because we have to react. But the problem with stress is that sometimes that amygdala can just grow a little bit too strong. And certainly with anxiety, it means that after a while, sometimes we're reacting to things at the same intensity. And actually, we need to save it a bit. We need to save it for the proper threats rather than just everything. And that's why anxiety can become so debilitating, and, it can make people not leave their houses because suddenly everything feels unsafe. And you get all these, hormones and cortisol and everything rushing through the body, and it's really draining as well. It leaves you feeling tired afterwards. So the rest and digest is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's when we're breathing calmly, we're resting, everything's fine, and we're safe. So what we have to be aware of is how much time do we spend in those two states in the course of our, say, working week? Because the problem with the amygdala is it's a bit like taking yourself to the gym and just exercising that, and it becomes stronger and stronger. And eventually I meet people who are really burned out, who've just been thriving on constant adrenaline. And it is so exhausting. So that's where we start to see fatigue and burnout coming in.
I really,
Sorry.
I really like the way, we all suffer with anxiety of one form or another, but this puts it into puts it into real context, that it's not actually me going mad or cracking up. It's a physical part of my body that is overreacting to my surroundings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember talking to counsellors, and they're like, if you live in that state of anxiety all the time, all you're doing is you're just giving that training, you're training that muscle, that part of your body. And like you said, like it's going to a gym, it's making it stronger and stronger, and it's taking over that part of your brain, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happens is our normal then becomes like a habit, and before you know it, I don't know what kinds of habits you might have, Bill, but for example, if you chew your fingernails, suddenly that's a habit, and it's like upon waking, your first thought of the day can be an anxious thought, and they become so automatic, we almost just don't recognize that happening. So I find that very interesting, how something can tip from being something that's motivational, because I do want to emphasize actually that anxiety is there to help us keep safe and do well and to motivate us, and 9 times out of 10 it does, because that means that we care about something really deeply. If we were all really laissez-faire, laid back, nothing would get done really. So we need a little bit of both, but what we can't be is like, constantly reacting. And that is the difference between the East and Western cultures, in the sense that, our brains want to always go to the future. And in the West, we're very busy activating that. Whereas in the East, they tend to adopt, more Buddhist practice, mindfulness practice. As you say, they tend to stay a bit more in the now, and that's what the difference is between the two states, I think.
So we can have healthy anxiety. So anxiety is fine. You can have healthy anxiety, and that, I suppose, what drives us and makes us do things. But then it's keeping a check, I suppose, on the unhealthy anxiety.
Yes. So for each person it's different, but if it tips into constantly overthinking things, feeling a great deal of distress, avoidance, some people will start, for example, to avoid situations that they're scared of, and in therapy what we have to do is actually get people to confront those fears rather than avoid them. Some people will tip more towards maybe I don't know, drinking, or, sort of unhealthy habits. I'm quite happy to say that, I enjoy drinking, and I also enjoy eating a whole packet of chocolate biscuits. But, it's like everything's got to stay in some sort of balance, I guess. So it's like, what's unhealthy? Waking up at, say, the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep. Shutting yourself maybe away or withdrawing from people. Being hooked excessively on the negativity of the news, or listening to the radio.
That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
And actually my wife, I'll switch the radio over to like Radio 4, and Emma's like, why are you doing that to yourself? But it is kind of like an addiction, isn't it? It's a habit.
It is, yeah.
An addiction. And so it's more of a habit to break and actually just put up some music and listen to music instead.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see how these little habits tip, and before we know it, it's like our norm. And we think they help, don't we? But actually what you're showing there is that mindfulness of actually, is being curious and questioning it and thinking, actually, how is this helping me? Actually, I have a choice. I can listen to, some really good joyful music, maybe, or some, something really heavy that gets the stress out or something. It depends what your genre is, but,
When I help clients, a lot of the time, and we've certainly had this in our business, and I'm sure you feel the same in yours, when it's like comes to pricing, and this is a big cause of anxiety for people, and coming to putting your prices up and talking to the customer, and it's about like educating people that all those feelings, like you said, the sleepless nights, the feeling sick, the wanting to run away, the flushed face, the sweaty palms, it's all natural, isn't it? And it's that part of your brain that's like taking over, when actually it's a very ancient emotion, isn't it? That part of that brain is very old, and it needs retraining.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the best ways to do that, so one of my top tips there is what we call cognitive reframe. And cognitive reframes are where, so let's take that example, you want to put your prices up, you might find the other person a little bit intimidating or scary maybe, or, so what I would invite people to do is, I suppose, is think, right, let's look at the evidence for and the evidence against, and then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And I guess in that situation, the answer is going to be no. But the problem is, if you never ask, then you're never going to know, and then nothing improves. So then you stay stuck. So, I mean, I'm a great preparer, as you know, I prepare for everything, but part of that is what gives me my confidence levels. So before I have any tricky conversations like that, I'll try and look at it from all angles and kind of get myself, so I feel just a little bit more ready. And let's face it, rejection hurts, doesn't it? Who enjoys that? But then, the world is so big. It's like, well, if that person says no, it doesn't mean everybody's going to say no. So
that's it. I've had this week, I've had 2 people say no to joining my program, but do we stop? No. We listen to feedback, we understand the reasons why it's not for them, and we move on. And it's the same for any business, isn't it? You can't just let that one no stop you.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the danger, isn't it? We get anxious and then we think, gosh, that was a terrifying experience, I'm never repeating that again. And I suppose I look out there at all the entrepreneurs, and I think one of the things they must have all done is really confronted all of those fears. If you think about Lord Sugar flogging his PCs and things, he probably had loads of no's, but I suppose isn't that what we recognize, that you just don't give up, or you go and get some help, so I know that your audience have your support on your program, and it means that they can come to you and talk things through. And I think that sounding board is so helpful when you're working in your own business, isn't it?
Yeah, when you're not left, I suppose you're not left with your inner thoughts all the time.
Which are mainly negative when it comes to anxiety, of course. We're our worst own enemies, aren't we, really? So
so one thing that actually, again, my wife Emma sort of taught me to do was, if I had negative thoughts sort of creeping in, you start thinking that, she always got me to visualize a big stop sign, the big stop sign that when you're driving out, that's a bit of is it NLP, or is it a different, you put an intervention in, aren't we? We're like, you start to see that the cycle is happening, the anxiety is building, and it's like putting that intervention in and saying stop.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love that, because actually it's a really creative way of doing it. You're visualizing something that gives you a pause, I guess, because the problem with anxiety and emotional reactions is they usually come really thick and fast. And anxiety is like popping a seed in the ground, and then suddenly there's a whole forest, and you can inhibit that for hours, can't you? You can go round and round, and you're adding the trees, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And there's an expression, isn't there? Can't see the wood for the trees. And that's why we end up just getting overwhelmed. So what I love about that technique is that you're actually putting in a visual pause. And of course, if you could just pause long enough to notice, it's almost like you're stepping back, maybe have a deep breath, you visualize your stop sign, and then you're in a better place, because what you're doing is you're switching down the amygdala and you're switching on your kind of rational thinking. Because don't forget, the two can't exist at the same time. So then you might come up with other choices rather than just reacting. So Yeah, I really like that idea. I don't know. I think of that as visualization and just taking a pause, which sometimes we're not very good at. I don't think, it's hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah. So obviously, I've been through counselling. I've been through getting help. So perhaps I'm more aware of when I need that intervention. I'm more aware of when that anxiety is building up, or the hypervigilance is starting to kick in again. So, but what if people do become aware, they do have those symptoms in the morning, like they feel sick, they don't want to go to work, they're physically sick, or they're shaking, they're sweaty. What kind of tools have we got in our armory to help combat that and help perhaps get us past those moments?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we take for granted is breath work, actually taking a very long, slow, deep breath. When we feel anxious and stressed, we're always breathing from the top of our chest. And what we need to do is actually expand the diaphragm. It's not a very comfortable feeling, I'll admit that. As a woman, the last thing I want to do is push my stomach out, to be honest, because we're always told to pull our stomachs in. But it's so important that you draw the oxygen down, and it is the only conscious way that you can influence an unconscious part of your system. So by taking that slow, deep breath, you're giving yourself that pause, and you're kind of offering the amygdala a bit of a reset. Now, the more that you practice that, the easier that gets. And then, from there, you might be able to make a different choice, or you might be able to challenge what the thought is. And if we take, for example, the cognitive behavioral therapy model, that suggests that there will always be a thought that preceded that anxious response in the body. Some of it might be conscious, but some of it could be unconscious. And that's sometimes the confusing part, because people will say to me, I have no clue why I felt like that. But, that's why obviously people do end up going into counselling to talk those things through. But let's try the conscious stuff first. And taking a nice deep breath is a great tool. It's free. It's actually easy. And, everybody can do that. So I always get people started there first. Before we even start to challenge the mental stuff, let's actually get the physiological response just a little bit tuned down,
I always thought of it, I always think of it, the breathing, and I do forget to do it. And it's good to you always remind me of this whenever we talk and do these sort of lives and stuff. And I always find myself doing it as well when we actually start talking about it. And so I always think about it, it's kind of like you're oxygenating your body and starting to shrink that muscle in your brain, or that part of your brain that's taking over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it funny how, you and I would always say, Bill, that we've got loads of advice to help everybody else. But, we forget that for ourselves, don't we? But when we do actually do it, we do notice a difference. So,
yeah. And another thing, sort of from the coaching side of things that I help people with, is actually taking some action around what the issue is that you're worrying about. So again, it might be some concerns about pricing and having to put your prices up, or that difficult conversation, but actually that anxiety is not going to go away. We can learn how to sort of deal with it and how to perhaps treat it a bit, but taking that action and actually getting over speaking to that customer, putting that post out about your prices, action sometimes alleviates that anxiety, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I suppose in that situation, it's like you could see, I often say to you, or I said on the webinar, about if you wanted a definition of anxiety, it's like there's the overestimation of the threat coupled with exactly the same moment in your mind that you won't be able to cope with that threat. That's the two things that are going on in terms of the thinking. So actually, taking that time, as you say, to prepare, to maybe get some advice, talk it over with a friend, you could even rehearse it if you wanted to, couldn't you? I'm a kind of say out loud kind of person. So, maybe people think that's a bit mad sometimes, but I can often be sort of walking around mumbling to myself. And it's usually because I'm rehearsing something I really want to say. And that just helps me with my confidence. So I suppose that's the key thing, is it's finding what works for you. And, I don't know about, I think about all the obstacles that you've overcome in your business. You know, you must have had moments where you thought, oh, really not looking forward to this one. And, you know, what helps, you know? So
it is just taking that action. And it's, well, first of all, it's understanding, and I suppose this comes from working in the police and understanding that I remember going on like the very first emergency blue light call, and your body is in bits, you're shaking, your hands are like shaking, your voice is wobbly on the radio, and then you turn up to that call and you get there and it's just like, oh, is this it?
yeah.
And it's like I've just gone through all that emotion, all that stress, and body like changes for nothing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because quite often the call is exaggerated to get police response, or there may be loads of warning signs on this person, but actually when you get there, they're like a 5-foot skinny weed, and
yeah.
And your body and my body has become used to dealing with that high stress environment, I suppose. Whereas a lot of people, so going back to what I was saying, is acknowledging what the symptoms are, the signs and symptoms. So knowing what those signs and symptoms are, saying to myself, okay, anxiety is like turned up. I'm a bit worried about this, but that's fine. That's normal. It's a normal physiological reaction. And then doing that breathing, like you're saying, and grounding ourselves, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and then taking that action, because if we don't take that action, then nothing's going to change, is it?
No, absolutely. You just sit and stew, don't you? And people can lose a lot of time to anxiety, and I think one of the serious side effects is that actually we can withdraw. So anxiety sometimes is sort of talked about as being quite a selfish position, because actually it all becomes about what's in your mind, and then that disconnects us from our relationships as well. So to be fair to you, Bill, I do think that 999s, obviously that's a group that I've worked with for years, and to be fair to you, the difference between a 999 and me is that I can usually flight. I could run away if I wanted to. And, for you and your 999 colleagues, you don't have that choice sometimes. So I'm always interested talking to police officers and CCAM, the ambulance technicians, because I often say to them, what do you do? What is it that helps you? You're in a high stress environment, and any top tips. I think that's gold. It's like liquid gold. I want to know how you cope. So.
Well, a lot of it is that suit of armor that they wear, isn't it? The uniform. And as pet groomers, and even like myself today, I'm wearing a kind of a uniform. I've got branded clothing on. It's kind of like put my uniform on in the morning and get to work. So it kind of still works, doesn't it? And sometimes, just doing like a Facebook Live like we're doing now, that can fill people with so much fear and anxiety. But by doing it and having done it, I know that when I finish this call with you, I'm still going to be safe. I'm still going to be, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's like, for me, I don't have a workwear armor, but my little armor, funnily enough, is my lanyard. And, my teenager said to me, Mum, you look a bit silly walking around with a key around your neck. Well, first of all, I always lose my keys, so that's not good. But this lanyard has been with me for years, and it is like my little piece of armor. So I'm all for like whatever it is that works for an individual. Some people will carry a little smooth pebble, which is like their stress release stone, that they love the texture and it's calming and it brings them into the now. Some people use elastic bands around their wrists so they can just gently snap it. Obviously don't hurt yourself, but you snap it and it's like, now back into the moment, let's think about what's going on here. So there's so many different ways.
And there's just a comment that's come in about anxiety sort of leading to panic attacks. Is there that's when it becomes a real sort of issue for people, isn't it? Because that is really debilitating and can strike at any time, can't it?
Anxiety coupled with panic is probably an indicator that you're going to be able to benefit from some more professional support, if I'm honest.
Mhm.
Part of the reason for that is what tends to happen is that the original kind of activating event that caused the panic attack is often forgotten. And what people get caught up in is a vicious cycle of fearing the panic attack itself. So you kind of lose sight of what the anxiety is. And people will say to me, oh, as soon as I detect that little sensation of whatever it is in my body, I go into it like activates a full state of fear. But again, all the advice around panic attacks is to breathe as slowly and calmly. Sometimes that's why people used to give people a brown paper bag. So just slow the breathing down. And people will say panic attacks last for a long time, but in truth they don't. And it's just reassuring yourself that you're safe, it's okay, maybe getting some support. But I do feel for anybody who's got anxiety with panic, because it just can become a bit of a loop. Very hard to get out of that. But there is tons of advice online, and if you don't want to go and see somebody about it, then be curious enough maybe to look at all the self-help resources online.
Yeah, there must be quite a few apps these days that can help us with breathing, and we're going to be doing a talk later in the month about meditation.
Okay.
And stuff like that, because it's all sort of things that we can do during the day, even whilst we're working. We can still do the breathing exercises, the grounding exercises, and a kind of meditation, can't we, whilst working?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just debunk some myths there that people think they have to sit in, kind of quiet, dark rooms with jingle jangles and candles. It's really not about that anymore. It's like short, sharp moments that just help calm that system down. So I'm totally in support of that. Like 60 seconds has got to be better than nothing. Yes. So everybody can find 60 seconds, can't they, in a day? Hopefully.
Hopefully. So can we just have a touch on stress? And is there a difference between stressing and anxiety? Do they cause the same sort of feelings and emotions, or are they just exactly the same?
I think that's a really good question, actually. I've got to think about that one. So I suppose for me, the stress response is what we classify as the amygdala firing off, and that's what gets the adrenaline pumping. But that can, as we said, that can be motivational. It can make you do your best presentation or have your best sales conversation. Anxiety, you can be not very stressed, shall we say. So think about somebody who's sitting there having their coffee at home and they start worrying about, I don't know, world events. So the news triggers something in them, they feel a little bit of distress, they emotionally react, and then suddenly they're worrying about something that they can neither influence or change. It might be that when that happened, they weren't particularly feeling stressed. It's just that something has triggered that anxious response. But it's fair to say that stress and anxiety do go in hand to a certain extent, because we get stressed and then we worry about things and we think that worrying about them helps. But then we're not really taking any action to resolve the problem. So
maybe stress is like short term, and then anxiety is sort of long term.
Yeah, it kind of lingers maybe.
And I was always told, I don't know if this is right, but I was under the impression that if you live with anxiety for a long period of time, it can actually then sort of go into depression. So it's important to sort of recognize it again, recognize the signs and symptoms, understand what's going on, and then try and get some kind of help or support around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the features of depression tend to be quite you might have the worry, but then you might also criticize yourself for not being able to do something right. So I always think about depression as anger turned in that's unexpressed. And some clients say to me, oh, I don't often hear depression explained like that. But if you think about it, the thinking error that's set up is you're mainly in the past. Anxiety is always in the future. And it could be that there's some unexpressed issue going on. You couldn't say something to somebody, or you feel there's an injustice maybe. And so I suppose in my work with counselling, we're bringing a voice to the unexpressed. And I always find that to be a feature of depression, no matter what the cause is. So that's how I think about the differences between anxiety and depression. But if you're always anxious, and, a lot of people can't change that situation. So they get defeatist and they self-sabotage, they might criticize themselves. And then you're kind of like knocking yourself down as well. So it's like there's a couple of thinking errors going on all at the same time usually. And, most situations that happen are not usually of people's choosing, and it's none of their making. Life has a habit of throwing things at us, and sometimes we just don't have all the things that we need to be able to respond maybe. So it's like sometimes learning new skills. Dealing with anxiety is like learning a new skill, and depression too. And sadly, if you think about the workplace, it's not really the kind of course that's sold to us, is it? It's they're very much always focused on skills rather than well-being maybe. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So anxiety is like kind of looking in the future and worrying about the future, and then depression is kind of dealing with what's gone on in the past.
Yeah, and sort of getting a little bit stuck there, I guess. And you can see how between the two experiences, like the present doesn't even come into it really, does it? It's like the present is really squished into a tiny little stopgap. So
yeah, I suppose we get busy sort of working, living our lives day to day, but we don't actually acknowledge what's going on day to day. We're sort of thinking about the future or stuck in the past, aren't we?
Yeah.
Through your how long you've been working as a counsellor, have you found that like the rise of social media and like the busyness of our days, what's kind of happened there? Do you think that's fueling a lot of it?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I think it's the constant intrusive nature of social media. So, for example, one of my top tips is I have turned off all news notifications on my phone, because I don't want to know about horrible things all the time. I would like to choose what news I read, and I go to my reliable sources. And also, I think it just draws us into a waste of time, often checking things out, reading useless articles. Don't get me wrong, I do think social media has its place, and
right now.
absolutely not completely opposed to it. But I do think that what social media does, unfortunately, is it kind of encourages us to be taking in information that isn't necessarily relevant to the present, So it's like we have a choice, don't we, about what is it that I need to know, what's relevant to my present, and what's all this stuff, and I do think that social media becomes an addiction. So actually, how does that help? That's just what does it actually serve? Is it helpful or is it not helpful, I guess, when you're going through a difficult time?
Yeah, there's certainly some habit breaks that I need to put in, like you're saying, like the news. And I often watch the news readers, and I just think, how do they deal with that? How do they deal with what they're putting out day in, day out?
Yeah
Quite tough.
I suppose I don't know if the auto cue experience makes it more automatic, in the sense that, I don't know, reading something just creates that slight bit of distance than if it was coming from them all the time personally. Do you know what I mean? It's like, does the auto cue put that break pause in for them? I don't know.
So that's their suit of armor, their barrier.
Yeah, could be. Everyone's got one, haven't they? So
yeah. Well, let's end this hopefully on a positive. Let's give the listeners and the viewers some top tips to deal with anxiety. Have you got like 5 top tips that you can dish out, or is there not that many?
Let's try for 5, shall we? Okay. Yeah. So I think the first one is to try grounding. Well, the first one has got to be breathing, okay? Making that pause and being curious. What is this about? Why am I having this reaction? Not judging it. Why am I having this reaction? And then thinking about, what do I need? You can support the breathing with grounding. So the best exercise for that is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. I know that you've heard about this before, but it's where you just give yourself that break pause, like your stop sign. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, and so forth. 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And even if you can't taste anything, you're still noticing maybe how your mouth feels. So you're break pausing. So breathing, grounding. The third one, I think, is the cognitive reappraisal. So let's start to notice the thinking, but challenge the thoughts so they are less automatic. And it's 3 simple questions. What's the evidence for the threat? What's the evidence against the threat? And how can I, and what's the worst that could happen? I think number 4 has to be what you said around taking action. So stewing in worry is never good for anybody. And don't forget, it's okay not to have to do it all by yourself either. It's okay to ask for a bit of support, talk to a friend. You know, that process of, you chew the cud with a friend and it just feels a bit better. What we're trying to do there is that let's shrink those anxieties down into realities, because they are always what if questions. And number 5, I think, self-care and meditation and all of those really good habits. Okay, let's make them into micro habits. So I don't want people to meditate for 20 minutes because they're going to be stressed trying to find 20 minutes. I would like people just to think, what is a 60-second thing I can do for myself, maybe every hour, whether it be, just a mindful moment, having a glass of water, talking to a friend. Do something for 60 seconds that brings you hopefully more into the present. And when I say bring water, I mean literally just focusing on maybe how it tastes, how it looks. We can all do 60-second micro habits. And I like that idea. Let's not stress people out with big stuff because you won't do it. Let's do 60 seconds as often as we can,
60 seconds of breathing. You tick off two
You can, yeah,
there at once, can't you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's always to remember the breathing.
Yes, always breathing. It's the biggest weapon you have in your armory to look after yourself, so
you feel everything start to flood out. All that anxiety starts to sort of flood out when you're breathing out.
Yeah. And you can actually imagine that, you're inhaling oxygen and you're letting out the stress. So some people do visualize that as well. And you can also do other techniques. There's so much out there where you can imagine drawing in, nourishing light or sunshine. I usually use that one, and I'm just like soaking it in, and I feel like I'm back in a sort of holiday mode, and then I let it go again. And I just think, again, it's just finding what works for each individual, and there's no rights or wrongs. It really is individual. If it works for you to go and stand at the bottom of your garden and do a handstand for 60 seconds, then do it. What's the excuse for not doing it? We can all make those choices. So excellent.
Well, it's been really helpful, and I think hopefully it's some people will start to realize that it's okay to feel like anxiety is natural,
yes.
But there is a reason. There's a reason why your body's reacting to the way it is, and there is a way to start taking back that control of your emotions and that anxiety feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I hope that's been helpful. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you, Bill, for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. You've got me out of my bunker into the wider world. So as you said, working for yourself is very lonely. So much appreciation. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. And how can people get hold of you if they want to follow up and speak to you?
My details are on my website, which is www.wellbeingandchange.com. I'm better actually through email or text. I know my website contact form has been playing up. So my email address is anna@wellbeingandchange.com. And, basically I live by most of my emails and my telephone calls. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Excellent. Thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Yep. See you soon. Take care, Bill.
Bye-bye.